Bruce has also travelled to Atlanta. He's come to the city's Piedmont Park to meet historian Tom Hanchett and discover what happened to Joseph and his family here.
Hello, Tom.
Welcome.
Thank you for meeting me here.
Welcome to Atlanta in the New South.
Atlanta, straight away, I love it. The fresh air, the beautiful sky. After New York, I can breathe again. It's beautiful.
Well, I've got something to show you. This lake didn't exist when your great-grandfather came to...
It didn't exist?
No. There was a little stream, and he said, let's dam up the stream and create a feature, a park, a lake that everyone can enjoy. Well, he talks in his writings, Joseph Forsyth Johnson, about drawing your eye through a landscape. And here, you know, you move from the shimmering lake to the island that you pointed out, to the trees, and then the skyscrapers. And the skyscrapers are fairly new because this area has become so popular.
Beautiful. Really, really beautiful.
What he brought from England was this new gospel of naturalistic planning.
Yes, yes.
And a city park for the people.
Yes. He was a bit of a trailblazer then.
He was very much a trailblazer.
Yeah.
Joseph and Frances had arrived in Atlanta in the middle of an economic boom. A group of millionaire property developers were looking for an experienced landscape gardener to help them create an idyllic new suburb. Joseph's designs for their Inman Park project made him a rich man for the first time in his life.
Johnson's brief was to create a neighborhood of curving streets and beautiful trees that was so attractive that you would come in and you would buy a lot and you would build your own mansion.
Your own specifications.
Yes. And it attracted the best people in Atlanta. All his life, Joseph Forsyth Johnson had been trying to make connections. Yeah. And here, at last, he'd done it. He had created not only a beautiful neighborhood, but he was becoming part of society.
Following his success at Inman Park, Joseph won commissions all over the South. Frances travelled with him and gave birth to another son, Cecil, in Marietta, Georgia. In Atlanta in 1892, Edwina, a daughter, was born. Bruce has come to the Atlanta History Center to find out more about Joseph and Frances's life in the city and whether they finally got married here.
Paul Crater?
Yes.
Oh, the man I've come to see.
Paul Crater, the center's senior librarian, has agreed to help Bruce with his search.
Have you had any luck at all finding out if Joseph Forsyth Johnson got married to a Frances Clark?
Well, we do in fact have an index of marriages in Fulton County dating from 1854 to 1921. And we checked that index, and unfortunately we could find no record of a marriage between Joseph and Frances. So we'll have to look in other areas to sort of clarify the picture.
The absence of a marriage record means that Bruce has found no evidence that Joseph ever married Frances. But Paul now wants to check how the couple were listed in residential records from the 1890s, when their last child, Edwina, was born in the city.
This is a city directory, and it lists out all the individuals who lived in the city this year, and it gives their address. And so I think this is probably going to be our best resource to find where they lived in the city.
Exactly.
This lists by address, and it also lists by the person's last name. So we're going to look for Johnson.
Johnson. Joseph, but not a Joseph Johnson, is there? No. I don't see a Joseph Johnson there, do you?
There doesn't appear to be. So why don't we go on to the 1900 city directories?
Okay.
Once again, Joseph fails to show up in residential records.
Right.
It's an old book and not the best of condition.
Marshall, Johnson, Jerry, Frances. What does wid? Is that widow?
That indicates that Frances is a widow.
A widow? And she's a dressmaker, well, because she worked in a draper shop in London.
She lived at 67 Formwalt, which was kind of a rundown area of Atlanta.
Yes.
So she appears to be in kind of a difficult situation.
Yeah.
So this clearly states that Francis is alone.
Definitely alone. Yeah, a widow of he's got to be widow of Joseph, yes. How did he come to die? What happened?
Well, in piecing that together, we came across a biographical sketch of his second son, Cecil.
Cecil Forsyth Johnson. Right. Son of Joseph F. Forsyth and Francis, there we are, Clark, with an E at the end, Johnson. His father was a landscape architect. He returned to England in the late 1880s, shortly after the birth of his son, and while there contracted pneumonia and died. Well, that doesn't seem to tally.
Bruce is confused about this account of Joseph's death, as it doesn't match the one in Linda Mundy's letter.
The story told in the family is that Joseph Forsyth Johnson returned to England and died at sea.
Bruce wants to check the date given for Joseph's death in the 1880s against Christina's diary, which his cousin Alan gave him in England.
Father arrived in Liverpool by the Etruria, the ship called the Etruria, and this was in December 1894. Oh dear, oh dear. There's nothing about pneumonia. Here he is, sailing in 1895 back to New York. What was he up to?
Christina's diary suggests that Joseph was alive in England several years after his reported death from pneumonia. Bruce has asked Paul Crater to check the transatlantic passenger lists to see if this is true.
I've found a reference for Joseph Johnson.
Yeah.
And this is for a trip back to New York from the UK in February of 1895. He's listed as a gardener.
It's got to be him.
Traveling alone with one piece of luggage.
One piece that travelled light.
The passenger list confirms Christina's account of Joseph's visit in 1894 and his safe return to New York a month later.
I've come up with two more references, which I think might be very interesting to you.
Good.
This is a passenger list for 1899.
Yeah.
And this lists Joseph Forsyth Johnson as a passenger.
Is that 60? He's 60?
Age 60 years old.
Yes, he's older now.
It lists
still
still a gardener, so we know we have the right person.
On another boat.
On another boat.
And he still hasn't died.
He's still alive.
Paul's second list shows Joseph travelling to England a decade after his reported death from pneumonia.
I'd like to show you a final record.
Yeah.
This, as you can see,
is 1903. He sailed from Liverpool the 28th of January 1903, arriving at the port of New York. Oh my goodness.
The final list shows Joseph sailing back from England to New York, 3 years after Frances is listed as a widow in Atlanta.
He's left one lot in Tottenham, and now he's done the same thing with Frances, who he ran away with as a young woman of 26, and now he's sort of ditched her and her 3 children. For the second time, he's let his family down. He really has.